I kind of talk about my memory book. I wish I wrote them down in my memory book. But it's interesting that if you know where the parsonage is, it's at the top of the hill, and it's a huge picture window. I must go by that window 100 times a day. And when I go by that window, I look down to see what's happening in the church parking lot. So last week, I had a memory book experience. I looked out from that picture window, and I saw parked in the corner of the driveway, it must have been one of those 30-foot RVs. It was huge. It was huge. And so I kind of went down to take a look, and it had Kansas City Chiefs stuff all over it. And I thought, what do I do with this person? So in the neighborhood is a former college football player. So I went to his house and I told him what was going on. I said, will you go with me and let's see what this is going up to? And he was funny. He said, yes, but remember, Pastor Dave, I can run faster than you can. You know, it's like, well, you're going to leave me stranded with this person? So we went down there, and it was something else. This RV had a screen door with it. It had music blasting inside. There was a dog on a leash outside. This person he was camping out at the Doolin Church parking lot. And so I banged on the door and I said, hello. And I said, I'm the preacher here at the church. And what's going on? He said, well, I needed a place to stay, so I just kind of chose this parking lot. And I said, well, you know, that's just not a very good idea. And here's this friend of mine getting ready to sprint anytime. And I just told him, I said, you know, it's a church parking lot, and if something happens to you, we're responsible for it, and I just can't have you here. He said, well, where am I going to go? And I said, well, you know, I don't just get on your phone and find RV places, and it'll be fine. So we walked back, and about a half hour later, I looked out, he was still there. So I went down, and so he could see me, I started taking pictures. And within 30 seconds, he was out of the parking lot. So, but anyway, you never know what's going to happen in the Doolin Church back parking lot. We could do a lot. So we talked about name changes, and there are several in the Bible. One is Abram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah, Jacob to Israel, Simon to Peter. And so we're looking today at the name change of Abram to Abraham, and what that means. But I also thought that for today, as we look at this story, it talks about trust. And trust means that we have confidence. We put our total confidence in a person, place, or thing. And with the recent political drama, I thought it was good to talk about this. I was hearing one of the news shows, the newscast, it talked about trust in the Supreme Court and how trust in the Supreme Court by Americans has gone down 20 points. And sometimes I like the decision, sometimes I don't. But I find it very interesting that when the Supreme Court's rules in the way that we personally like it, we think they're the greatest thing in the world, go up 20 points. But if we don't like something that they did, then it goes down 20 points. So, you know, I guess they're doing their best. It's a hard job for them to do. And we just have to trust. And today we're looking at the trust that Abraham had in God and God had in Abraham, and how we are called to trust in God in our daily lives when things don't go the way we think they should go. We have to put our trust in God. I know in my profession there are a lot of things that go on that I don't understand, and I had a bishop once that told me, he said, you know, Dave, there is something that someone else knows that you don't know. And a lot of times we make quick decisions, quick criticisms, without knowing the full picture or the full story, the full understanding. So we're going to look at the person of Abraham, today. So here we go. If there's a story in the Old Testament that is very hard for us to understand, it is this one of Abraham, and God is telling them he is to sacrifice his son, his only son, Isaac, to God. And we may think to ourselves, what kind of loving God is that? So let's look at some background. We know that what happens is that there is the story of the Tower of Babel, and God disperses people all over the world, and God is looking for a particular person that God can have a covenant that God can bless, and then these families, these persons, these patriarchs can in turn show their love to God. And so God searches and he finds this person, Abram, and he decides that he's going to have a covenant with him. And Abram is living in modern-day Iraq. And God tells them he is to travel to Canaan some 1,000 miles. And it's not like getting in an airplane and flying to 1,000 miles or getting in our car or a train, but it is walking with all of your family, with all of the stuff that you have, these 1,000 miles. And it is there that his name, Abram, is changed to Abraham. And God says, I will make you a great nation, I will bless you and make your name great. And in all of this, God is going to love him, God is going to protect him, but in return, Abraham and his descendants must love God, must worship God, must obey God, and this is what we call a covenant. So Abram leaves Iraq, travels to Canaan, promises are fulfilled, his name is changed to Abraham, and he prospers. Abraham has a wife. Her name was Sarai, whose name changed to Sarah. And for many years, they have no children. And Abraham is thinking, how can I fulfill God's covenant if I don't have any kids to carry on my name? And so miraculously, they have a child. And the child's name is Isaac, which means, do you remember that? It means laughter. Because Sarah, when she was told that she's going to have a kid, she laughed. And so God says, I'll fix you. Your child's name is going to be Isaac, which means laughter. So they have this child and they spoil Isaac. They think Isaac is the greatest thing in the world. What a gift that now they have. But God gets a little worried about Abraham. He's thinking, Abraham down there, he's spending a lot of time with Isaac. Is Isaac more important than me in my life and what I do for him? And so God gives Abraham a test. And it's a hard test of Abraham's devotion to God. And in this test, we see where Abraham calls out, "Here I am," 3 times. Once is God is calling, and Abraham says, "Here I am." Once Isaac calls out to his father, and Abraham says, "Here I am." And the 3rd time, the angel calls out to Abraham, and Abraham says, "Here I am." Abraham does not want to skirt. He does not want to run away from God. He's willing to, whenever God or an angel or Isaac calls on him, he says, "Here I am. I'm here for you." I've told you this before when I go shopping at the Giant or these various places and I see Doolin disciples that haven't been here for a while, they run away. They don't come up and say, "Oh, Pastor Dave, how are you?" I'm not going to fuss, but they kind of see me and then I kind of find them in the aisles and, "Hey, how are you doing? How is life? Where have you been?" And then I get the litany of things. Abraham doesn't do that. Each time he says, "Here I am." So here we have God that Abraham prepares an altar, lays Isaac on it, and lifts his hand with a knife in it. And then the angel intervenes and calls out to Abraham and he says, "Here I am." And the angel says, "Do not do this. Now the Lord knows that you fear God. Now the Lord knows that you love God with all your mind, body, soul, and strength." And then Abraham sacrifices a ram that is there. And then God gives Abraham three things. One, a blessed family. One, he's father of a nation. And the other is that he will have the promised land. So when we think about trust, I want us to think about the times when God may be calling us out to do something. And are we going to say, here I am? Or are we going to say, you know, God, not right now. I've got this. It's all about trust. I thought about some things where we find trust lacking today. Police and community members, there's still a lot of distrust with that. Various ethnicities in America, there is not a lot of trust. Trust between rich and poor, trust between Republicans and Democrats and libertarians and independents. Trust of identities of Americans. Trust between husband and wife, and trust between parents and children. Trust in the United Methodist Church. Right now in our denomination, we are having what's called annual conferences. And Alan Chen and I went to represent Doolin at a recent annual conference in Roanoke. And as I have been following these various annual conferences, there is now going on the process of disaffiliation, and we've been talking about it seems, for years ad nauseum. And so the numbers to this point, and then there'll be another count in 2024, and some at the end of the year, we have 30,000 United Methodist churches in the world. That's a lot of churches. 6,000 have left. And people before thought, oh, it'll be 5%, it'll be 10%. 6,000 is a lot of churches. 6,000's a lot of people. And there is a lot of distrust. I was talking to my brother-in-law and my sister, and my brother-in-law's sister attends a church in North Carolina, and they just voted to disaffiliate. And the question was, what does Pastor Dave think about that? So we'll have to have a phone call with them. But, I have just found out that some churches are using human sexuality as an excuse to get out. And it's not fair, and it's not right. There are some large churches that are leaving because they're tired of doing apportionments, and it's a way for them to get out of paying the bill. We have bishops who have retired that are going to other Methodist denominations, and I was very irritated when some of them would say, when I retire, I'm going to go help this particular denomination. And I wanted to say, well, why don't you just quit right now and leave? Why should we be paying your wage when you're going to leave? So I hope that here at Doolin Church, that as we begin our 24th year together, it's hard to believe. I was 41, 42. I've forgotten how long ago it was. That we can have a lot of trust among ourselves and with Pastor Dave. Because from the start, I said to you several years ago when this first started, I will make a decision independently of you, and you will make a decision independently of me. And that has worked, that I know so far, very, very well. And so what's going to happen is in 2024, there's going to be a general conference that will make a decision, and then I will make a decision, and Doolin Church will make a decision. And as I know ourselves pretty well for 23 years, I think that we will make the best decision for all of us. So that's where we are in our denomination and in our world. So I wanted to close with this. I was getting a card. I was at Giant. I didn't see any lapsed Doolin disciples that day. That's a great name, lapsed Doolin disciples. LDC. Are you an LDC? Lapsed Doolin, no, lapsed LDD. How about that? And I was getting a card for a friend of mine, a good friend, clergy person that died fighting cancer for 8 years. I wanted to get a card. And then there was a card that just caught my eye that was on trust. And so I wanted to read this card for us today. 5 things God wants us to remember in trying times. You're never, ever alone. Nothing takes God by surprise. When you're weak, God is strong. God is the God of new beginnings. God's love never gives up on us. Trust God to carry us through. In our personal lives, in our family lives, in our political lives, in our employment lives, when we have those struggles, when we have those hurdles, trust God that God will carry us. It doesn't see us, God will carry us through. And then there's a little verse from Isaiah 46. It says, I will be your God throughout your lifetime. I made you and I will care for you. I will carry you along and save you. And my friends, that is the good news. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and we all say together, Amen.